So while I think the intersection between CS and music is really interesting, obviously since I did a whole dissertation that basically explored it and I'm doing a podcast on it, there are some scholars who suggest that, quote, the design and execution of block-based languages and platforms themselves may limit and frustrate meaningful music making for children. In particular, Payne and Ruthman discuss limitations from the types of blocks Scratch offers for creating music and sounds, as well as the inconsistent timing of music sequences running in parallel, i.e. at the same time. Given that platforms such as Scratch have music making and learning limitations, and platforms such as EarSketch have limited music production abilities compared to many modern DAWs, why would a popular musician choose to create music with code instead of through other mediums? End quote. So this is a question that I really think that both music educators and CS educators need to sit with. So yeah, you could engage in practices that blur these boundaries, like, well, instead of composing with pencil and paper, you could compose by coding. Okay, you could, but does that enhance the music making experience in any way? Or is it just a substitution? So if we think of the SAMR framework, so SAMR is a framework for thinking of like using technology or devices. And so the S is substitution, the A is augmentation, the M is modification, and the R is redefinition. So substitution when it comes to SAMR and music encoding might be, well, instead of composing in Sibelius, which is a music notation software, you could compose in Sonic Pi, where you write out lines of code that do the same composition. Augmentation might be, okay, well, instead of just writing out the notation on there, in Sonic Pi, you can actually like shape the sound. You can make it a shorter sound, you can make it a longer sound, you can make it so it gradually gets louder and softer, etc. So it allows you to augment the sound capabilities in ways that you might not have been able to do with the other music software for writing music, composing. Modification might be, okay, not only can I compose music, but I can perform live while I'm doing it by writing out lines of code. So that allows you to do two things simultaneously. But a redefinition might be, okay, well, I could compose music with different control structures that allow me to create semi-improvised or aleatoric music based off of algorithmic sequences. So for example, I wrote a program for a randomized drum set. This drum set would play infinitely different beats and fills, and I had no idea what it would play. I just give it a different seed, a different number, and then it would play a completely different random set of beats, fills, etc. forever. That is not something that I can create with just a music notation software on its own. I had to have computer science practices and coding practices to be able to do that. That is a redefinition of engaging with music in ways that I could not have done by simply substituting out one piece of technology for another. So what I recommend is, yes, if you are going to explore the intersections of CS and music, totally recommend it. It's a lot of fun, but do so in ways that allow you to make music in ways that are not possible without that intersection of music and CS. Here's a quote from page 164. Quote, rather than using computer science practices to replicate already existing music making and music learning opportunities, educators interested in exploring the intersections of music technology and computer science should consider how the intersections of popular musicianship and computer science practices might afford new forms of music engagement that would otherwise be impossible without the incorporation of computer science practices, end quote. And a little bit further down on page 165, quote, in other words, the coding practices enable a medium for making music that would otherwise be unavailable without the intersection of both music and computer science practices, and are therefore essential practices for anyone interested in creating similar music, end quote. This excerpt of the CSK8 podcast is from episode number 121 and is titled Intersections of Popular Musicianship and Computer Science Practices.